The king's advisor who stole his destiny. In the old Ashanti Kingdom, before cars and phones, when talking drums carried news and the golden stool was the heart of the people, a prophecy rose like morning smoke over Kumasi. The royal drummer beat the message at dawn. The king's newborn son would bring great wealth to the land. Cocoa farms would spread like green carpets. Gold would glitter brighter than sunrise, and peace would sit like a mother with a sleeping child. The palace danced. The queen smiled with tears. Even the trees seemed to clap. But one man did not smile. It was Nana Kofi Brempong, the king's advisor. His face was smooth like a calabash, but his heart had sharp stones. He feared a future where the young prince would grow strong and his own power would shrink like salted snails in a hot pan. While everyone sang for the baby, Nana Kofi hid in the shadows and listened to his own dark thoughts. That night, a servant named Amasewa, a gentle woman with bright eyes and strong hands, birthed a weak, coughing child in a small room near the palace kitchens. Her boy struggled to breathe. The midwife whispered prayers. Amma kissed the child and begged the heavens not to take him. Outside, the crickets sang. Inside the advisor's mind, a wicked idea bloomed like a poisonous flower. What if I switch the babies? He thought. Let the prophecy drown in confusion. Let the prince grow sick, and the sick child wear silk. I will stand near the throne forever. He moved like a cat in the dark. He bribed a sleepy guard with palm wine. He reached the royal nursery as the queen finally slept from her labor. He lifted the royal baby, warm and peaceful. He walked to the servant's room, placed the royal child in Amma's cloth, and took the sickly boy to the royal cradle. He left as quietly as wind through a crack. Heaven saw him. The ancestors saw him, but no one spoke that night. So began a secret that would walk through years like a barefoot traveler. The palace called the weak child Prince Mensa. Priest poured oil on his head, but he coughed through every blessing. He tired when he walked. He fainted when the drums were loud. The king loved him, but worry sat in the king's heart like a heavy stone. In the servants' quarters, Amasewa called the hidden prince Kojo Hadu. He was lively like firelight. He laughed easily. He stared up at the moon and reached for it with his little hands. When he cried, the crying stopped quickly, as if night itself said, Hush, little one, your time will come. Kojo grew in a busy courtyard that smelled of fufu and smoke and new yam. He fetched water from the well, chased chickens that refused to be chased, and followed the older boys to the training field, where the warriors practiced with spears and shields. He loved the talking drums. He would stand close and copy the rhythms on his chest. The drummers laughed and showed him patterns. Sometimes, when he tapped a beat only he could hear, the wind changed, the fire bent, and the drum hands trembled as if they were listening to him. The old drummer, Kwaku Tenko, watched him with eyes like wise embers. This boy, the old man murmured. The gods smiled at him. In the marketplace, Kojo met a girl who walked with the quiet confidence of a queen. Her name was Yaku, daughter of a blacksmith whose hands were burned and blessed by fire. She carried plantain, laughed with sellers, and spoke boldly to men twice her size. One afternoon, a quarrel broke out as two traders fought over a spot. The crowd yelled. Ya stepped between them with a simple proverb. If two elephants fight, the grass suffers. She set a small line of stones, made the two move one hand length each, and peace returned. Kojo watched, surprised by her courage and her mind. When she looked up and caught him staring, she teased, Are you counting my steps? He coughed, shy for the first time, and said, No, I am counting how many problems you have already solved today. She laughed, and after that, they noticed each other in the market, like two stars that always find the same sky. Years moved. Kojo learned to wrestle, to read the drum language, to smell the rain before it came. He cared for children, helped old women carry water, and spoke softly to angry men. People said his words sat well in the ear. When problems rose in the town, somehow Kojo was near. He was not rich, but he was rich in spirit. Amasewa told him stories of ancestors, of Gie Yame, except for God, and of Sankofa, the bird that looks back to move forward. Remember, she told him, a person who knows where he comes from knows where he's going. He would nod and kiss her hands. He loved her like the roots loves the soil. Inside the palace, the weak Prince Mensa grew into a thin young man. He was kind but tired. He preferred to sit with books and ask questions about stars, herbs, and history. He dreamed of peace and the healing of his people, but his body was a small rope trying to pull a big rock. The king looked at him with sadness. Headmen whispered. Some wanted a cousin to replace him. The queen, who never stopped loving her child, prayed more, fasted more, and hid her fear inside her smile. The advisor, Nana Kofi, moved like smoke through every rumor. He kept the king afraid, kept the queen confused, and tied many little strings behind the curtain. His plan was to keep the throne weak so that he could act like the real power. Then danger arrived from the west like a dark cloud. A greedy war chief from a rival land stared at Ashanti gold with hungry eyes. He said the Ashanti were soft and foolish, guided by a sickly prince and an old king. He gathered soldiers like ants on ripe fruit. He sent spies. He promised his men silk, salt, and stolen daughters. Drums at the border beat a warning. The king called his warriors. Chiefs gathered. War tasted the air. On the night before the first battle, Kojo sat with Ya Yako near the silent river Tano. Fireflies blinked like tiny ancestors. The moon dipped her foot in the water. Ya said, I am afraid for the people. War chews up the innocent first. Kojo listened, heart heavy. I cannot just sit and watch, he said. But who am I? A servant's son. Ya took his hand, firm and sure. You are the son of your mother, and that truth makes you strong. You are the son of this land, and the drums already know your name. If you feel called, go, but promise me you will take your wisdom, not just your strength. Kojo stroked the water and promised. The river sighed. In that quiet, a far-off drum beat three notes that sounded like a blessing. At the warrior camp, Kojo offered his head, heart, and hands. The captains laughed at first. Then they watched him move. How he listened, how his eyes measured distance, how he respected even the smallest soldier. The old drummer Kwakutenko told the head war captain, let this one stand by the drum. He hears what others only feel. That night, Kojo climbed a rock, closed his eyes, and beat a message across the hills and valleys. The drums spoke like birds. Villages heard. Move the goats, hide the grain, dig the pit, watch the ridge. People obeyed, trusting the music they had always trusted. Kojo planned traps like weavers plan kente, pattern on pattern, meaning on meaning. He asked farmers where the ground was soft. He asked hunters where what dogs ran. He asked mothers which parts children used, because the safe part is often the clever part. He respected everyone's knowledge, and the land opened itself to him. When the enemy came at dawn, fast and proud, the earth surprised them. Their horses slipped into hidden holes. Their feet met thorn fences that looked like dry grass. Beehives hung low, fell like rain, and bees became tiny soldiers with loud wings. Smoke rose from wet leaves in 100 cooking pots, turned by Kojo into a frog that hid Ashanti arrows. Drums said left, and the enemy went right into a trap. Drums said wait, and the Ashanti waited like patient hunters. The battle turned. The rival war chief shouted until his voice broke. He pushed forward again. Kojo saw a gap, ran like a deer, and took a fallen banner. He waved it wide to signal the flank. The Ashanti surged with a lion's roar. By sunset, the enemy fled like goats from a brush fire. But war does not end in a single day. It returned twice more, and twice Kojo answered with new ideas. At the second battle, It lined the ridge with empty calabashes. When the drums beat and the warriors howled, the hollow gods echoed 10 times louder. The enemy thought giants lived on the hill, and their courage leaked away. At the third battle, Kojo took sacks used for cocoa beans, though cocoa was still small in those days, and filled them with sand to build quick walls where there were none. Behind those low walls, Archers became quiet ghosts. The enemy, confused and tired, finally broke. The rival war chief fell, and Shati stood, bleeding but unbroken. The king sent for the brave young planner, who had turned danger into dust. Kojo entered the palace covered in dust and dried sweat, carrying the calm of a river before dawn. The courtiers stared. The queen's eyes filled and spilled for reasons she could not name. Prince Mensan, gentle and pale, rose and bowed to Kojo as if to a teacher. The king touched Kojo's shoulder and said, "You carried many on your back without asking for reward. Ask now, what do you want?" Kojo thought of his mother, Amasewa, who washed other people's clothes with royal soap but slept on a reed mat. He thought of the hungry children whose eyes he had met. "I want the kingdom to rest," Kojo said softly. "I want the poor to eat. I want the widows to be safe. I want the drums to be used more for weddings than for war." The hall grew quiet. The king smiled with a tired joy. "You ask not for your belly, but for the people. Come back tomorrow for a proper honor. Let the city dance for you." That night, the advisor Nana Kofi could not sleep. He walked in circles like a trapped hyena. He remembered the night of the switch. He remembered the prophecy. He watched Kojo's face in his mind and felt something in his bones shake. If the truth comes, he thought, my name will turn to ash. He went to the shrine and made quick, fearful prayers. He bribed another guard. He looked for ways to push Kojo away. But truth is like a stubborn yam. If you step on it, it still shows its head. At sunrise, the people crowded the palace courtyard. Drummers oiled their skins. Dancers painted their feet. Chiefs dressed in kente that told stories in color. The golden stool rested under a white umbrella. The air smelled of palm wine and roasted plantain. The king rose slowly. The queen stood by him, her face bright and worried at the same time. Prince Mensa leaned on a cane, thin but holding his chin high. The advisor Nana Kofi stood too, his smile as hard as a dry plantain chip. Kojo walked into the circle as the drums rolled like thunder, far away. His mother, Amma, stood at the back squeezing her hands. Yako stood near a column, eyes shining. The king raised his staff. "Today," he said, "we honor a son of Ashanti who saved us with wisdom, not only with strength. Let him be named Protector of the Realm." The crowd cheered. Kojo knelt to receive a gold arm ring, and then something strange happened. As the queen stepped forward to tie cloth on Kojo's shoulder, the cloth touched his bare skin near the collarbone. The sun saw that spot and kissed it. A bright golden mark sprang to life under the skin, a small, perfect, and decra shape, like a glowing gyeyame, turning slow and clear. The crowd gasped. The drummers faltered. The queen's hand trembled. Amasewa covered her mouth. Yayako's eyes filled like the river. The old drummer, Kwakutenko, fell to his knees. "The royal mark," he whispered. "The royal mark reveals itself only at the coronation of a true heir." The king staggered, then caught himself. He looked at the mark, then at Kojo's face. His eyes widened as if a bird flew out of his chest. The advisor, Nana Kofi, tried to laugh and failed. The mark pulsed gently like a heartbeat. The hair felt thick, important, waiting. The queen took a step back, her voice shaking. "My son," she murmured to Kojo, and even she did not know whether she meant the word as a wish or a truth. Prince Mensan, pale and kind, looked at Kojo with a strange peace. "Brother," he said simply, and then he bowed his head to hide his tears. The people began to whisper like leaves. Nana Kofi, the advisor, tried to catch the moment and strangle it. He clapped loudly. Magic tricks, he barked, calling the glow a trick of oil and light. But the golden stool itself answered him. It rose slightly, just the height of a kola nut, as if a wind had lifted it, and he turned, facing Kojo. Umbrella bearers cried out and dropped their poles. A royal priest shouted, Hush! The ancestors are speaking. The talking drum started an ancient, deep pattern that most had only heard in stories. Kojo did not run. He stood as if the earth held his feet. He looked at the king. He looked at his mother, Amma. He looked at Prince Mensa. And then he looked at the advisor. Nana Kofi's face was wet now, not with sweat, but with fear that smells like sour wine. His mouth opened and closed like a fish tossed on hot sand. He tried to speak. His tongue felt heavy. He tried to step back. His knees turned to plantain mash. The truth rose like a flood and broke his lips. I switched the babies, he cried, voice high and thin. I switched them the night the prophecy was born. I feared the boy and loved my power more than I loved my people. The crowd shouted, Hey! The queen screamed and covered her face. The king's staff shook. The golden stool hummed. As the last word left his mouth, Nana Kofi clutched his chest. His eyes rolled like storm clouds. He fell to the ground. He did not move again. Some said his heart broke under the weight of his own secrets. Others said the ancestors flicked him like a fly. No one argued with the result. Silence sat for one long breath. Then everything moved. The queen ran to Kojo and touched his face with shaking fingers. I felt something the first day I saw you, she whispered. Now I know why. The king, old and heavy with pain and years, stepped down from his stool. He put his forehead against Kojo's forehead. Forgive us, he said, for living so long with a lie we did not know. Kojo, who had fought men and planned battles, fought tears now. I forgive, he said. He turned to Prince Mensa. I honor you, he added. Mensa smiled through tears. I cannot fight, the gentle prince said, but I can bless. He raised his thin hand over Kojo's head and gave a brother's blessing that felt like rain on dry ground. That day, the chiefs and priests agreed quickly. The people had already decided with their eyes and their hearts. The king decided Kojo the rightful heir. The royal mark kept its steady glow, soft as a baby's breath, sure as sunrise. The drums began again, not with noise, but with meaning. They spoke Kojo's true titles. They called his mother Ama Sewa and seated her near the queen, not as a servant, but as a mother of a king. The market danced. Strangers hugged each other. Food tasted better than food had tasted the day before. But the story did not end there because heavens does not write short stories when the lesson must travel far. As the sun bent low and gold spread across every roof, Yako slipped away from the crowd. Kojo saw her leaving and followed. He found her at the old river place where they once made promises. She stood very still, like a carved figure that might speak if you were patient. Say something, Kojo begged, afraid without knowing why. Ya breathed slowly, the way a drum breathes between beats. I must say something you will not like, she said. I came into your life like a market girl, with strong legs and a brave mouth. But that was not the whole truth. When you were a child and the advisor made the wicked switch, the river Tano cried so loudly the rocks shook. The river begged Yame for a guard for you. I am that guard. I am the river's daughter walking like a human. I am the one who brought your steps to the drum, who held back the storm the night the bees should have flown the wrong way, who covered your enemies with fog. I love you as a human loves, real and deep. But my time in this skin is almost finished. The promise was simple. Protect you until the mark shows. Now the mark has shown. The river is calling me home. Kojo felt the world tip like a calabash spilling water. He grabbed her hands. They were warm, so human, so familiar. You are my heart, he said. Let me give you a new promise. Be my queen. Sit with me. counsel me, laugh with me, grow old with me. Ya's mouth trembled like a leaf in a small wind. I want that more than breath, she said, but heaven's stems are heaven's stems. If I stay longer than I was sent, your light will dim, your wisdom will cloud, your people will suffer. I would rather break my own heart than break your kingdom. She pushed a small calabash into his hands, sealed with white clay. Inside is a seed that will never fail. Plant it near the palace. It will grow into a cocoa tree that bears even in hard seasons. Let it remind you that love is work, not just sweetness. Remember me when you taste it. Kojo cried like a child in the night of his first loss. Ya kissed his forehead. A true king cries when he must, she whispered. The river lifted its small waves like fingers. Gold lights floated up from Ya's skin, gentle as dust, dancing in a window beam. She smiled through tears that made their own tiny stars. You cannot steal what heaven has written, she said softly. Not even love that was written to protect more than to possess. Then she stepped backward into the water. The light folded into the river. The surface closed like a mouth after a prayer. Silence came like a blanket. At dawn, Kojo planted the seed behind the palace with his own hands. He worked the soil like a farmer. He watered it with tears and then with river water carried in a clean pot. Ama Sewa stood with him, quiet and strong. The queen stood too, holding Hama's hand, two mothers tied by fate and by love for the same son. Prince Mensa leaned on his cane and whispered a blessing he had learned from an old book. The king watched, proud and tired and thankful. The little seed slept, then woke, then pushed up a green tongue that tasted the early light. People came and smiled and felt hope moving in their chest. Days later, the coronation came in full, with marks and horns and clothes that shook like sunset. The golden stool stood firm. The mark glowed once more when the crown touched Kojo's head. The crowd roared his name. The talking drum said, Kojo Adu, the king whose wisdom is louder than war. He stood, not bigger than a man, but carrying something bigger than himself. He made new laws that were simple and fair. He returned stolen land to widows. He made market days safer by punishing thieves and praising honesty. He ordered that boys and girls learn not to only fight but to count, to read, to weave truth into trade. He visited soldiers' mothers and spoke their sons' names with dignity. He prayed at the river with a clean heart. And still, the story was not finished because heaven loves a twist that teaches deeper. One cool evening, as fireflies wrote tiny letters in the air, a thin figure in a plain cloth arrived at the palace gate. He had the eyes of a gentle doctor and the smile of someone who forgives easily. He asked to see the king. Guards hesitated. Ama Sewa walked by and saw his face. Her breath caught. She whispered a name she had said in dreams. Mensa. The thin man bowed. Mother, he said. It was Prince Mensan, but not a prince now. Just a healer who had left the palace quietly after the first great battle, choosing to learn herbs in a far village rather than wear silk he did not deserve. He had been told by a traveler that a new king with a glowing mark had risen. He had come to kneel and to bless. In the great hall, Mensa and Kojo stood like mirrors that tell different truth. Kojo walked down from the stool and hugged Mensa with both arms, long and hard. The people, remembering pain, began to forgive. Mensa held Kojo's hand up like a champion and said for all to hear, this is the one heaven chose. Do not use my weakness to doubt his strength, and do not use his strength to shame my weakness. We are two stories heaven wrote with one pen. The crowd hummed approval. The queen wept again, but now her tears tasted like healing. Amasewa, who had suffered silently for years, with a secret she did not know she carried, finally felt the weight roll off her back. Peace settled like a large bird, folding its wings over the kingdom. Trade grew. The cocoa tree behind the palace grew taller than gossip and stronger than jealousy. Children played under it. Lovers sat under it and promised things they mostly kept. The walls grew old and tired and went away to border less blessed lands. The stool stayed steady. The mark glowed quietly when needed and rested when not. Then came the festival of New Yam, with dance that woke sleeping ancestors and praise that made the sky lean closer. The whole city came out in color. Masks laughed. Drummers chased each other with rhythms. The king walked among the people without fear. He stopped at the cocoa tree and touched its bark, remembering Ya's last touch and the way the river held secrets with dignity. He smiled so the crowd could smile. He felt the warm joy of a shepherd with a safe flock. And just when everyone thought the tale had reached its sweetest end, the sky wrote the final shock with a finger of thunder. A new dancer entered the square, wearing a white cloth and a mask, painted half gold and half river blue. The steps were not like any dance the people knew. They were light, flowing, making shapes that looked like handicraft symbols. Sankofa, Dwenerime, Yeyame, right there in the dust. The crowd fell silent, spellbound. The dancer stopped before the king, bowed and spoke in a voice that sounded like Ya Yako and the river speaking together. Great king, the voice said gently, you have kept the people safe. You have chosen wisdom and mercy. You have honored the poor and kissed truth on the mouth. The river keeps its promises, and heaven keeps its promises too. Turn your face to the cocoa tree. Kojo turned. Before everyone, the cocoa tree shivered as if a wind rose from inside it. The bark opened into light. From that light stepped Yaku, not watery now, but real, shining and human, wearing simple clothes and a smile that could end wars. The people screamed and then could not make sound. Ya walked to the king and held up a small child with eyes like sunrise and a tiny golden mark sleeping on his chest. I was taken, she said, but I was also trusted. Heaven asked me, if we return you, will you use love as a service and not as a throne? I said yes. The river released me when the seed became a tree because you watered it with justice and not with pride. This is Kwabenatano, our son, born between two worlds, so he can remind us that a king belongs to his people and the river belongs to its banks. Kojo fell to his knees, laughing and crying in the same breath. The queen screamed and danced, old and young at once. Amasewa threw her cloth around her shoulders and shouted praises. Prince Mensah lifted the child, and the child did not cry. He just blinked slowly, as if he had already seen many things and was not afraid. The crowd sang until the stars clapped. And then came the last drop of scandal that made the whole land talk for days. Not with ugly gossip, but with open mouths and slapping thighs. And hey, did you hear? From the back of the crowd, stumbling and confused, ran a woman dressed in palace clothes. She was the late advisor Nana Kofi's secret wife, hidden for years in a house covered with lies. She fell at the king's feet and poured out a basket of letters Nana Kofi had written but never mailed. In them, he confessed not only the baby switch, but also a second plan. After the first prince failed, he would bring in a foreign war chief's daughter as a puppet queen and sell half the land for salt and guns. The letters were signed with his blood mark. Those letters, spread on the ground, showed how close the kingdom had come to being eaten from the inside. The people shivered, then cheered louder than they had cheered before, not because of the evil, but because of how completely it had been defeated by truth, by the river, by a mother's quiet love, by a market girl's brave heart, and by a servant boy who was a king all along. That night, the talking drums carried one message to every corner. You cannot steal what heaven has written. You may hide it under cloth, or bury it in a dark room, or tie it with silk and lies. But it will rise, it will glow, it will call the river by name, and the river will answer. In the old Ashanti Kingdom, long before cars and phones, the people slept with full bellies and open windows. The cocoa tree rustled like a soft lullaby. The king and Yayako sat together, fingers touching, eyes on their child and then on their people, understanding at last that the greatest crown is the one a heart wears when it chooses what is right, even when it hurts. In the morning, when the sun woke the roofs, the royal mark on the king's chest pulsed once, golden and calm, and the same mark winked faintly on the baby's skin. The crowd came again to stare at the cocoa tree and to talk in big circles about how the river had brought back a queen and exposed letters that nearly sold the land. They said, "This indeed is too sweet to be real." And then they laughed because it was real and because sweetness, like justice, tastes strongest after bitter. And each time someone told the tale, they ended with the line the drums had already taught them to say: "You cannot steal what heaven has written." The end. The moral lesson to this story is: you cannot steal what heaven has written. If this story speaks to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with one person who needs this reminder. Your support helps us bring more powerful African folktale stories to life. Thanks for watching.